Welcome back to Made It Out to the Polls. This is the second episode of our voter education series in collaboration with LPAC. Today we sit down with Texas State Senator Molly Cook, an ER nurse from Dallas. We're going to share our personal stories with abortion, the stigmas and misconceptions, what Roe V Wade was and why it was overturned, and how this is putting people and LGBTQ rights at risk. As a reminder, we want to make this as accessible as possible. So when you hear this noise, that means a special guest is popping by to help me break down terms, concepts, or events of historical relevance. For example, I said our guest today is a state senator, but what does that even mean? What's a state senator? What do they do? Here to explain is content creator and podcast host Shannon Beveridge driving a U-Haul.
Hey. The U.S. has a Senate, which along with the House of Representatives votes on and passes federal laws.
Yeah.
Each state also has a state Senate and a state House, kind of like a mini version of the federal government, which pass state-level laws. For example, this episode's guest, Molly Cook, is a state senator, and she gets to vote on Texas state laws. Depending on the state senators are elected every 2 or 4 years. So this year, when you vote for president, you'll probably also get to vote for your state senator. So vote.
Thanks, Shan. Good luck moving this weekend. Also, drive that thing the speed limit. It's a state law. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. All right, ready to go?
Ready.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. I also grew up in Texas. I grew up in Dallas, and I had a very specific experience being a queer person in Texas.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your experience in Houston?
Totally. And were you in Dallas proper or in the suburbs?
Well, actually, so I was in Fort Worth. I always say Dallas because it makes it easier for people, but like I was actually in Fort Worth, which is the countryside.
Fort Worth is not Dallas. Ask people from Fort Worth. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I grew up in the suburbs of Houston, grew up in Spring, and then graduated from the Woodlands, which is actually Arcade Fire has an album called The Suburbs, and it's about the Woodlands.
Oh my gosh,
one of the members is from the Woodlands. So very much grew up, where do you go to church is like the second question that somebody asks when they meet you. And I did not know that I was bisexual or wasn't like out until 2020. Actually, when I really fell for a woman, and we ended up dating for a while, but I kind of always knew, there's something there. And I always tell people it's a little embarrassing, but I watched Will and Grace faithfully. Everything was every Thursday night or something like that. And of course now it doesn't always hold up. It's the most inclusive show. But at the time, it was like my only entree into the world of anything that isn't straight or cis.
Right.
And I just remember thinking like, this is not sinful. It's not bad. They look like they're having a lot of fun together.
Yeah, that looks great.
It looks great. So I kind of always had it in my mind that, there's something to this. And slowly over time, I went to college at UT in Austin, and my world really opened up. And
yeah. We were just talking about this last night. I have a very similar experience. I only came out 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was a COVID coming out too. It was like, I think there's something to being different in a state like this, but also being able to fit in and like being able to be like, okay, yeah, I think I could go down the road of being with a guy and getting married and having that whole experience. It kind of just makes you go along with the crowd, even though you always have that kind of knowing of like, maybe this isn't the only option for me.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes it harder to like figure it out and parse through it.
I think so too. And I know I found it was just a really exciting and liberating experience to think of anything other than this is the path that I'm on. Mm. And the first time I really had that was when I came out as someone who doesn't want children.
Wow.
So realizing I'm not on this timetable to get pregnant by 35, which means I don't have to marry a man, which means I don't have to do, and then thinking, oh, I've actually got the whole world ahead of me. I can make choices. I can set up my own value system. I can kiss women,
Yeah,
and
totally.
it provided a lot of opportunity for introspection, I think, that I wouldn't have otherwise had.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a good segue into kind of the topic. As someone who has experienced having an abortion in Texas, and I know kind of the stigmas and the languaging around it. It can be a tough experience, even if it's something that you're sure about and that you're sure that you don't want, to have children or you don't want to have children with this specific person. Mm-hmm. Can you share your experience?
Yeah. And my abortion experience was incredibly profound. And as a white woman whose parents had money, right, I was raised in the suburbs, I've always had a lot of sympathy for what other people experience in the crosshairs of bad policy. But this was really the first time that I was personally in the crosshairs of bad policy. And it just changed fundamentally how I understood how government affects our lives, how we need to be participating in it, how we need to be caring for one another despite, terrible laws. So in 2014, I had an abortion at a clinic in Austin. And at the time, it was shortly after then Senator Wendy Davis's filibuster. She's a hero for that for the rest of all time.
Are you wondering who Wendy Davis is and what the hell filibuster means? Here's comedian Rachel Samples, who clearly doesn't read her emails, to explain.
So is this not Hot Ones? I thought we were gonna do like Wings and like Sean and... Let's just get into it then. So before a law gets passed, the Senate has to vote and have a majority in favor. There's a certain amount of time allocated for these voting sessions where the senators get to discuss and deliberate before voting. But if they talky too long, they don't get to vote and the measure goes bye-bye. A filibuster is a tactic used to delay or block a vote on a measure by preventing the debate on it from ending. So basically they talk and run out of time to vote, causing it to get delayed or dismissed. On June 25th, 2013, Texas State Senator Wendy Davis held a 13-hour-long filibuster to block a measure which made abortion infinitely more difficult to access in Texas. Shout out Wendy. Do you guys want to get Wendy's? Like the chain, not Wendy Davis, because we don't know her personally yet.
Basically, it was running up against time. They were trying to pass, I guess a law to make it completely illegal. It's all kind of in the wash now. But and she decided to filibuster so that the session ran out of time to pass the law. Mm-hmm. And it was just, she had on her famous tennis shoes and the women, she kept getting dinged because they wanted her to stop filibustering. And so they're saying, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. And the crowd inside the Capitol was screaming so loudly that they could not conduct business. And they did end up running out of time. And of course, as is typical in Texas, the governor then immediately called a special session, went ahead and passed, that's how it kind of goes down here. But what she left inside of me is a huge part of the reason that I'm now a Texas senator. Wow. And so I'm like, I have chills thinking about it. You never know kind of the reverberations of what you do. And so even though it seemed like kind of a lost cause at the time, I think there's a whole generation of women that really do look at that moment and know how powerful it was, or were there with their sisters, or, feeling that. And of course, abortion does not just affect women, but some amazing women have gone there for us and gone to bat for us on this. So yeah, I watched that happen. And then pretty shortly after that, found myself needing an abortion. Wow. And I was in a situationship that, I was in a really tough time in my life, and I'm a strong woman. I have a really great community of people. And nonetheless, I found myself in a situation where I was not feeling attached to myself. I was not loving myself. I was not present every day. It just wasn't a good place, and ended up pregnant with a fetus that I just didn't want to have, And it's hard to share that story with some people, because even today, outdoor knocking, talking about this with folks, you get a lot of judgment for it not being health related. Mm-hmm. I didn't need this abortion so that I could get chemotherapy. I didn't need this abortion because it was, gonna even necessarily be a fetus that wasn't viable. I didn't know. I didn't get very far through the pregnancy. But you're looking at those two lines and you're like, now it's me.
Right.
And I got to make this decision and figure out what to do. And it was kind of a couple-week process of trying to find a clinic. They're all backed up. There's only 8 of them. You have to do the 24-hour waiting period. And it was wild to watch that policy play out, sitting on the exam table in this room and being like, dang, that's why they passed this. I feel terrible. I'm so scared. I don't know who to call or what to do. And I got to figure this out. And now they have thrown all these roadblocks in there for me and made it so much more confusing and so much more difficult. And I made the right call. And there was a very important friend and woman in my life who I still love. And I called her and she was like, you're getting the abortion.
Yeah.
You're not having a baby right now, you know?
Right.
And I thank God for her every single day, like truly. Yeah. And so I went through with it. And I just remember sitting in the waiting room with mostly all women, not entirely. There were men in there too, but mostly all women, just wall to wall. Every single seat was full. I heard multiple languages. It was just so clear that people had traveled from all over, you know, to come one of the only places that was open and get through the procedure, and I'm in the waiting room afterward. And that waiting room will always be, or recovery room rather, one of the most sacred experiences of my entire life.
Wow.
And again, abortions are for people who need them, not necessarily just women, but it was 6 women or so in this recovery room, all in recliners. And they had cookies and juice for us, you know, after you give blood. And I was just crying. Tears were just streaming down my cheeks, and just so much experience, so much stigma, so much just packed into this whole moment. And one of the other women got up and hugged me. And we were both just crying and holding each other. And that was the moment that the healing could begin, that the unpacking of all of this could begin, for me to really understand, what did I just experience? How do I actually feel about it? What are the values that I have that are underneath all of this? And what do I want to think differently about? Or what do I want to not think differently about? It was just very powerful, and in the care of these other women in that moment. And so then kind of put me on another path of thinking, what is abortion? How do I feel about this? And how can we make it safe and available and stigma-free for everybody in this state who needs one? And how important it is for all of us to plug into this system, even though politics do kind of suck sometimes.
Yeah.
We've got to be there because it's our bodies that are on the line.
That they are talking about. I think there's something so specific in the southern states when talking about abortion. I was so clear on this decision. I did not even talk to the man I was dating. And it's interesting because I was so unplugged from who I was. I was a closeted gay woman. I was making decisions that were not in line with who I am today and my belief systems today. But for some reason, I had the wherewithal to say, like, this is the right decision for me. Yeah. And there was no question in my mind. But what is so interesting is the conversation that I had heard for most of my life. And it's very bizarre that in Texas, you do hear this conversation at a very young age. It's just weird. It permeates. It's like part of the culture. You're at school and kids are hearing it from their parents at home, and then they're taking it to school. And for some reason, abortion is just in the zeitgeist here. So all my life, I had grown up hearing, if you have an abortion, you will never be the same. You will regret this for the rest of your life. You will feel guilt till the day you die. You know, it's just these things that are so like bold statements that you are hearing, that even though I knew, like, this is what I'm doing, there's still this like record of all these things I've heard my whole life playing in my head. So it is very interesting that even if you feel like you're untouchable and it can still, just what you're hearing can still affect you really at your core.
Absolutely. And I mean, I remember, you know, and my faith has certainly changed shape over the years. But I grew up Christian. And I remember in 8th grade reading a verse in, I think it's Exodus or Leviticus, one of them, where, you know, it kind of talks about if you kill a man, you have to die. If you take his ox, you owe him an ox. If you knock a woman down, she miscarries, you owe her money. And I was like, well, that's weird, you know? And I kind of pointed it out to some of my teachers and stuff, and they didn't really want to talk too much about it.
Let's stay away from that one.
Right. But, you know, I'm even at a very young age, I was thinking critically about this and thinking, you know, it doesn't seem right. It's just not. It's not murder. It's not all these things. It actually seems like healthcare. But when it came time, the stigma, the guilt, the story that you should feel bad about this was really in there. And it took a lot of time to kind of unwind it all.
Well, then because you want to be silent, you don't want to share it because then you're thinking, I don't feel guilty about this. I'm actually okay with this decision.
Grateful.
But you can't tell people about that because then they're looking at you like, you don't feel guilt. Like, why don't you feel bad? So it is so isolating. It makes you feel so alone.
And I think that's actually a really valuable thing to bring up because I found that I had projected some of my expectations of that onto people. And then when I decided to run, and I ran for the seat first in 2022, and I thought, I got to tell my story. Like, I come from privilege. I want to live out loud from this seat. I got to find a way to share the story and be honest about it. The second I told people at the door about it, it was hugs and tears. Oh. So there was actually a lot less judgment out there than I was kind of expecting. But that makes sense because the culture that you can see and feel is so shaped by these laws.
Right.
It's so shaped by these influential, mostly men, mostly white men, mostly rich white men that govern the state. And so actually I found, as the data typically shows, most women have either had an abortion, know someone who have. Of course, the LGBTQ plus community is generally quite accepting and understanding of needing a full spectrum of reproductive health care available to them. And yeah, I've actually found that it's been really healing and for me, remove stigma. I've had the opportunity to help other people kind of move away from stigma associated with it. So yeah, it's really powerful how we absorb that.
Yeah.
And then potentially even project it out into the world and have it be this positive or negative, rather, feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. Can we briefly get into Roe v. Wade and what it is and why the case was overturned?
So Roe v. Wade was a landmark case, and a lot of folks don't realize, especially if you're coming in new to politics and policy, it's a big, important thing to get a law passed. It is potentially an even bigger and more important thing to get it implemented and enforced. So there are laws out there that exist. It was a big deal to get passed, and then nobody enforces it. Nobody makes sure that it gets done, or it gets enforced in a way that maybe was not the intent of the person who wrote the bill. Mm-hmm. Even further than that, it's how the law gets interpreted. And so every law that gets passed has the potential to be challenged and then can be interpreted by the court system, which is the entire point of our court system, is to kind of say, these are words on the page, but how does that actually need to play out? And so Roe v. Wade was a landmark case where a woman who was anonymous, was Jane Roe, was suing, I think the district attorney maybe, or attorney general, something like that, basically saying that she should have access to abortion when it was illegal in Texas. And famously, Sarah Weddington, a bunch of really awesome women lawyers from Texas, took it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said every American should have access to abortion. They set up the trimester kind of timeline framework that most people kind of intrinsically are familiar with, even if you don't know why, you know that this timeline exists. That's why. Mm-hmm. And I think, especially for people who are new to politics, it's so important to know that precedent is everything with the law. So once something gets interpreted a certain way by the court system, that's how it's going to be interpreted for all the courts below it. That's how people kind of move forward thinking of this law. If you want to think of it differently, you're going to have to pass a new law or amend the law in some sort of way. And so precedent is just really powerful. Once the Supreme Court says a certain thing, it's very uncommon for it to get overturned. Right. And then there were actually follow-up cases that sort of reinforced this framework, this timeline framework. And there were criticisms at the time. It was a hot topic at the time. And actually, a lot of people point to Roe v. Wade as sort of a turning point for the Republican and Democratic parties. I think we're going to see it with public education in Texas now. People will switch parties over a single issue. And at the time, abortion sort of did that. And so it set us on this path. And they were able to really message around it in a way that was super harmful and divisive.
Yeah.
So talking about a late-term abortion, right? Those are incredibly rare and uncommon, yet that became kind of the sticking point for so many people to switch parties and things like that. So Roe v. Wade was just a powerful moment that set the law for the whole nation and also kind of set a course for politics for the whole nation as well. And we were at least safely able to get abortions in Texas until it was overturned by Dobbs very recently, which I think probably most of us at least saw on social media.
Yeah. But what if my algorithm only feeds me mukbangs and ASMR? Here is recovering Catholic Emily Frizzell practicing her guitar skills to explain.
H-O-T-T-O-T-O, you can take me, Dobbs, to go. Oh my gosh, you guys just got me singing Chapel Roan's new hit song, Dobbs to Go, which talks about Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. It was a landmark Supreme Court case addressing whether the Constitution protects the right to an abortion. In Dobbs, the Supreme Court overturned the Roe v. Wade decision that protected abortion as a constitutional right since the 1970s, concluding that the Constitution does not protect the right to an abortion and leaving abortion rights up to each state. This decision shows that this Supreme Court is willing to overlook 5 decades of precedent. Dobbs.
So I want to understand, because conservatives prioritize this fiscal safety and their anti-government involvement, and they're so obsessed with keeping their freedom. Why do they want to take this freedom away? It seems so contradictory.
I think it's really important that especially leftists, progressives, Democrats, swing voters, anybody who's left of the right, basically, we just kind of step away from thinking that anymore. They are not the small government party. They are not the fiscally responsible party, and they are not the local government. It's just not anymore. It has changed, and I think there is a lot of, at least in Texas, which in my opinion, in my experience, Texas is sort of this birthplace and laboratory for bad policy that then moves out into the rest of the country.
Interesting.
And there's lots of those spots around the country, but Texas is one of them. And so they're really, at least from what I'm seeing, based on campaign donations and policy, that they file regardless of the constitutionality, it's a theocratic, fascist sort of party of white supremacy in a lot of ways. And so it's really not about keeping the government small. It's about keeping the government working for you. And you can mean a lot of different things. But for some folks, it means white people, or for some folks, it means really wealthy people or Christians, or et cetera, et cetera. And I think some people actually are well-intentioned and really believe that a fetus is a full person, and that God has already, given them the breath of life, which of course they don't breathe. But I think some people are well-intentioned and actually believe that this is like a mass event that's happening and they want to save all the fetuses. But they are being driven by messaging from somebody who is benefiting from this.
Right. Somebody
who wants to keep women from being in control of their bodies, women from enjoying recreational sex, people from enjoying recreational sex. They want to keep people from being free to express their gender in any sort of way, or maintain a certain flavor of society that just doesn't actually work for everyone. I don't fully understand it, and it's such a big issue that I suspect there's a lot of different sort of interests and probably somebody making a lot of money.
Yeah. Follow the money.
Right. And they're using a really visceral issue to accomplish that with great success, unfortunately, in a lot of states.
Yeah. What are we seeing happen with people who become pregnant in states like Texas, where abortion is now illegal?
We've seen a huge increase in births. We've seen a huge increase in the infant mortality rates, which were already really, there's not a word for it, just absolutely tragic here in this state. And I mean, this is the wealthiest nation that's ever existed, and this state had a $33 billion surplus last year. And our infant mortality rates, our maternal mortality rates, especially for Black women, especially for, anybody that has any layers of intersectionality, whether that's race or poverty or gender expression or any of that. Yeah, it's really bad. And I am now seeing it in my emergency department, and it takes a few different shapes. Either it's a person who's pretty young, where you really might want to offer them the full spectrum of reproductive options, right? If you want a baby, we're going to do everything we can to take care of you. If you don't want a baby, that should also be an option for you. Right. If you're, 16 or younger, 17 or younger, whatever age, and you're maybe not ready to start a family just yet, or you at least deserve that choice. And I'm also seeing a lot of fear in my coworkers. What are we allowed to say? What are we not allowed to say? We're seeing just a lot of fear, and there's no clarity around even what this does mean and when can you do an abortion? When can't you do an abortion? There's a lot of famous cases that are kind of showing up in the news now where women or people are left pregnant until it's truly life-threatening, which means that you have to be septic enough to qualify.
Wow.
Which is just shocking to me. As an emergency room nurse, the master's in public health, we should really be trying to prevent people from getting worse, not allowing them to get bad enough that you can finally intervene. We are seeing people moving out. People don't want to practice OB-GYN medicine here. It's really scary, and it's all so preventable, and it's so backward. So it's kind of every layer is sort of lurking all over society right now, and especially in healthcare spaces.
Yeah. In a state with some of the worst anti-LGBTQ legislation and some of the most restrictive abortion laws, can you speak to why it's so important to have someone like you elected?
Yeah. And I think, diversity is important, period. And biologically, right? Biodiversity is very important for survival and for flourishing, which is the opposite of suffering is flourishing. And so we want to see people flourishing. And so you need diversity. And I'm a white woman, cisgendered from the suburbs. So there's a lot of points of diversity that I don't bring to the table. I'm very aware of that. And it's important to have a diverse team, to celebrate diversity, to center affected communities in every single thing that you do, not just the policies that you try to pass, but also the way you even develop that policy, the way you bring people alongside you to come and work toward advocating for that. But I'm very excited to be the first out LGBTQ plus member. Barbara Jordan was gay, and she's a hero in a million ways. And so there have been LGBTQ plus senators before. It's a real honor. I think it's an honor to be a first anything anyway. But Harris County said, you're attacking us, you're attacking our community. And they actually elected 2 queer women organizers. So Lauren Ashley Simmons is the Democratic nominee for House District 146, also LPAC endorsed. She is unbelievable. She's unbelievable. Everyone should follow her. Everyone should go watch all her videos. Give her money. She's awesome. So, we said, we see you attacking us and we're coming back. And we're not afraid. We're not going anywhere. We're not changing who we are. The LGBTQ plus voting bloc in Houston, Harris County is one of the most powerful.
Wow.
There's a few endorsements that you can get that will change the outcome of your election. And one of them is the LGBTQ plus caucus.
Wow. You can't expect lesbians to know what a caucus is. Here's actor Jonica Booth studying her craft to explain.
Oh, we got company. In politics, a caucus is a meeting of people who share certain beliefs or identities, usually within their own political party. They come together to talk about the important issues and decide who will represent the party in elections. Caucus can be made up of elected officials, party activists, or a particular interest group of representatives.
So we're here. We're queer. Get used to it. Houston, Harris County. So that was really exciting. So I get the opportunity to be a symbol for our resilience, our symbol for our not taking shit from anyone, and that's an exciting thing. And then when they go up there and they try to attack our community, we are going to organize. They're going to have to look me in the eye and know that, I'm here right beside you. I like to be with women. I like to date women. You have to look at me now when you make those rules. And I get to sit here and have a senator in front of my name, even though I'm choosing to be out and different from what you guys are or expect. And I think that's really important. I think they should have to look at communities in the eye before they pass laws that marginalize them, that harm them, that put them in the crosshairs of these policies.
Yeah. I want to touch really quick on, I think a lot of the times politics, people who aren't plugged in, speaking as someone who at one point in my life was not plugged in, it's all about me. It's how does this affect me? Why should I care? People who aren't in these southern states where some of these really horrific things are happening, outside of you should just care because it's people and we should all care about other people. How could this affect them and why should they care about things that aren't happening where they're at?
I think evil people rely on complacency in a big way. So they want you not to know. They don't want you reading. They don't want you thinking. They don't want you thinking for yourself. They don't want you being in groups of other people who think like you at all. That's their worst nightmare, is critical thinkers who are connected to other critical thinkers. Mm-hmm. And I also think, I was talking to another senator just the other day about this, but I was chilled to my core when the Supreme Court ruling that gave the president ultimate immunity came out. And just, again, you kind of like have to have a little context to appreciate it, but this is unprecedented for every single year of our democracy. And we are a nation built on white supremacy and genocide. That's true. It is also true that our presidents were at least held accountable to the rule of law to some extent throughout our entire nation's history. And to completely reverse that, this is not about whether or not, authoritarianism or fascism is coming. We have now started building the blocks of authoritarianism, taking away our rights to make medical decisions about our own bodies, taking away the rights of physicians to practice with their patients in privacy. These are extremely fundamental human rights. Very fundamental human rights. And so nobody wants to think about politics. It sucks. It's hard. You have to face a lot of hard truths, but they are relying on you sitting back. They really are. And every people group, every nation, every, whatever, has the opportunity to shape its own change. And it's going to change, and somebody's going to shape it. And if it's not you and me, it's going to be somebody else. And sorry, the mini bar. We're like, hey, actually, come in. I'm glad you're here. So yeah, and then I also think, part of I think why I was able to get elected and am now going to be in one of 31 state senators, the 29th woman ever to come to the Texas Senate, right? All these like important things. It's a lot of power. It's a lot of influence. And the reason I was able to do it is because I cared about issues that didn't directly impact me.
Wow.
And so even if you don't feel affected by the policy, I'm begging you to please care about other people, to please care about how this affects other people. It will reach you, but that shouldn't even be the reason.
Right.
The reason should be we are all connected to each other. We're all people that share this planet, a planet that is at this point looking at a way shortened lifespan, at least for our perception of it. So we got to care about one another, and it's going to be so much more fun if we do.
Yeah.
Everything will be so much easier and so much more fun.
As you know, this series is a collaboration with LPAC. Can you speak to why organizations like LPAC are so important and what a contribution to them can do for queer women candidates?
Yeah. Let me go backwards with that. In general, making contributions is so important. Even if you don't have a lot of money, if you can set aside like $5 a month for LPAC or for your favorite candidate or for a different organization. My campaign, so I won out of a 6-way primary. I was running against 5 other Democrats in a very heavily Democratic district. So that was the race. And a primary is where you choose your Democrat and choose your Republican or whatever. And then in the general, all the parties compete. So if there's a Green Party candidate as well, but the Democrats and the Republicans, independents, battle it out. And so my primary was very, 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 very difficult and expensive. We had the lowest average donation by a mile.
Wow.
I entirely relied on, Leaders We Deserve came in at $300,000, right? Like I had some really big donations as well, but we relied heavily and could never have done it without our $2.50 donations, our $5 donations, our monthly recurring $5 or $10 donations. I'm still relying on those. They are still bringing in enough money for me to, pay for our website or whatever it is to stay up and stay running. And so it is incredibly important. And again, my experience of spirituality and faith has changed shape over the years, but I grew up in the church, and you got to tithe to your values. Mm-hmm. And that is something that Republicans do well. Their people show up to vote, and their people give them money, whatever they are able to give. Each of you give according to what you're able to do, right? And so we're asking you, people who care about the planet, people who care about reproductive health, people who care about, walkability, whatever it is, right? We need you to tithe to your values. We need you to just kind of believe with your heart, your actions, and your wallet.
Yeah.
Because this is America, and we're just going to not solve the money problem today. We need you to buy in a little bit. And you don't have to have more money. You just have to have enough money, right, to run campaigns to support candidates. And I got a check from LPAC, and I will say I got a check from LPAC in a moment of need.
Wow.
In a campaign, there comes times where you're not sure you're making payroll, and it's quite stressful. And so really that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Getting $1,000, getting $2,000, whatever it is, makes a huge difference, especially for newer candidates, for women candidates, for candidates, non-binary candidates, or anybody who's LGBTQ plus, period, all of that. Like anybody who's got an ounce of intersectionality has such a hard time raising money.
Yeah.
And so give to candidates, give to LPAC, absolutely. And then I think the importance of the organization existing is the importance of being plugged into community. And I've just seen that in our volunteer organizing. I'm already seeing it in our team that we're building in the Senate office. It is very, very, very important that the people that you work beside also take care of each other. And, that means bringing soup when you're sick. It means watching your dog when you're out of town. It means, helping me move my apartment recently, right? Just whatever that is, you got to be plugged into community. And so, especially for folks who are maybe not geographically as connected, right? Having an online community is really important. So organizations like LPAC are a great place for people to just kind of unzip your lizard suit, relax, be around people that think like you, care about you, and get your cup filled up, because we're fighting a lot of hard battles together.
Yeah. I am so grateful for you for taking the time to speak with us today, and also just grateful that you are one of the people who has the courage and the stomach to stay here, as you said, as someone who couldn't. I had to leave and, make my contribution somewhere else. So I'm very grateful for people like you who can stay and fight this really important fight.
Thanks, Mel.
Yeah. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, please. Thank you. I am at Molly for Texas, MOLLYFORTXAS, on all social media, including TikTok, although I don't know how to use it. And our website is mollyfortexas.com. So just go there. You can find us, make a donation, follow along.
Very easy. We play a game. It's called You Holler, You Ghost. They're perfect in every way, except this one thing.
Okay.
They exclusively shop at Buc-ee's. They've got the Buc-ee
U-Haul.
Really?
Yeah, I'm a Texas girly. I can live with that.
The magnets, the cups, the pajamas.
What's really funny is I can think of like 3 people that fit that description that I actually know.
Okay, do you want to know something funny? Matilda went to Buc-ee's one time and bought the whole store. She's got the pajamas. She's got it all. I think that's
I stuck up for you just now.
I'm like, you ghost, go.
That is so funny. Yeah, U-Haul, definitely.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Made It Out to the Polls. Join us next Thursday, September 26th, for our episode with Senator Tammy Baldwin, who championed the Marriage Equality Act. We discuss why we should all be staying vigilant to protect our rights, particularly our right to marry who we love. This series is a collaborative project between Made It Out Media and LPAC. This episode was produced by Matilda Jordan, Jacqueline Taboni, and Michelle Atwood, with special help from Sarah Gross. This episode was edited by Matilda Jordan, with cameos edited by Rachel Samples and Amber Rivera. Thank you to everyone involved, including our cameo guests, Shannon Beveridge, Rachel Samples, Jonica Booth, and Emily Frizzell. Visit teamlpac.com for more information on how you can help or donate.
Molly for office. Access to care is a right. If you agree, vote.